Hi, everybody. Welcome. Ritash here from Rang Foundation. One of the co-founders of this intersectional pan-India queer collective. We document multilingual, audio-visual, first-person narratives of intersectional queer people from across the world. And we also offer mental health care and legal referral and support, largely in India. We are young and started in 2020. Uh, so, as you all know, if you've been our follower or, actually have been joining these lives. We've been doing this for quite some time now. Ac- uh, and whereas on the other hand, uh, we used to earlier in the between 2020 and 2022, we did lots of mutual care and high
Hello.
self-care because we believe it's so important for us. Ah, Along with us, the co-hosts have been, um, yeah, hi. Sorry, I just for a second lost the thing, concentration. Have been Nestam Soji-esque, which works in the southern state of Andhra Pradesh, largely southern Indian state, sorry, or south, western, southeastern, depends on where you are in India. Okay, so they do this very important and tough uh, work of, discussing gender and sexuality with adolescents and teenagers in schools, because in institutions it's not easy to discuss these things. Okay, and it was founded by queer people, and they do lots of events, and like it happens in most parts of the world, there's always these visibility and maybe kind of events or discussions more in the larger metros. And though India has a very, very long indigenous queer culture and multiple subcultures, we know that it's still considered sometimes as what an urban Western English speaking speakers export. Okay, and very delighted welcoming Reina Taina. And Reina, again, though we have talked previously and I've prepped for this, I'm mispronounce your name, and you know but we originally from the Dominican Republic, lives in the US, has done their undergrad studies in international public affairs, but then they do so much more that. Yeah, like they are a mental health care advocate. And Raina, as you joined, I was saying about how mental health care is still very stigmatized and very taboo, because queer people, sometimes, as I was telling you earlier, we queers, wherever in the world we are, there are a few things like we can directly and instantaneously almost connect on, being, of course, discriminated, excluded, ridiculed, scorned, caricatured, whatever, or exoticized. Plus, we are supposed and so pathologized, there's something always wrong with us, is what the world wants to see us. Yeah. On one side, you will have so called laws and affirmative action that are happening. And then we're like, and unfortunately, because of that, many of us, despite maybe even if you have or something, it's almost a whole time and it's still struggling. And we have very few people to share that and stuff like that. And the more intersectionality is inevitable, okay? And yet, the more the so-called, the different, the marginalized identities that we carry, literally, it's like a baggage we carry. Should not be. We should just be different human beings like all others are. It becomes a challenge, and it's as though because somebody refuses to accept and understand us, they we have to keep justifying and struggling and experiencing pain for someone's refusal, for someone's insecurity, phobia, or whatever. And although we are not meeting out similar treatment to anybody, we're literally minding our business and living our lives. Okay. So, Reina, again, very warm welcome. And the beauty of the so many things. I mean, Reina, you're looking extra beautiful and glorious. I like your backdrop too. Yeah. But the thing is that also Reina is very tuned into what, not just the multiple kinds of indigenous cultures, but the subcultures, in India, South Asia, because in the island town, sorry, countries or the states around. I don't even want to prioritize the US of A in the uh, oceans, surrounding those countries. Let me say Atlantic Pacific Ocean. This is more Atlantic Ocean, right? The Indians, or that time it was, I think, British India or whatever India was there. We were all literally exported, transported as indentured labor. Okay, as if that was the only thing that we are made of or for, you know. And this is the same damn thing which happens. Sorry, I will going to be very blunt, and I'm sure Rena can resonate with this, because somewhere our skin color, our, I don't know, our build, our whatever, our unwillingness to be violent and aggressive, somewhere actually worked against us, and those, I don't know, centuries or even a millennia of that suppression has only passed on or resulted in intergenerational trauma. And despite all the abolitionism and all the anti-caste things in many of our countries, I don't think the change has been as it should be. Yeah, we are still, yeah. So, Raina, so many things you can talk about, but I want
Yeah.
you in at this point, and yeah, uh, you can respond to how it has been. I know it might sound like a very cliched question, but being an intersectional queer person who's open and with amidst all these challenges, is expressing themselves in the way uh, you want, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
also, right, and negotiating life in the US, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is
Yeah.
that you would like to comment on, maybe, or reflect on what we've said, that also as part of your experience?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, thank you for having me. I'm La Reina Taina, or also known as Camo. Yeah, I'm an independent researcher, musician, artist, multi-hyphenated in any way. And yeah, really thinking about our conversation last time and our conversation now, I think it's very special and important to note that relationship between Quisqueya, also known as the Dominican Republic, and Haiti, and India. And like learning that, for example, with the history of India, I don't know if a lot of people know, but when we're looking at how much money and wealth and resources were extrapolated from India, it amounts up to $43 trillion. And that's something that a lot of people don't know. And that over the course from the 1700s to now, when they were really in India, they took that much money. So I say that because when we talk about transness, we need to talk about decolonial theory. We need to talk about decolonization, because it was colonization that told India that they can't be trans and they can't. It was colonization that told the Dominican Republic that they cannot be indigenous, that they have to hate their Haitian brothers and sisters. That all came from colonization, and even more importantly, with Quisqueya being the first island, the first nation to have been in contact with, Christopher Columbus and these colonizers in Spain and Europe. That's something that's also very important to know, because my people, the Taino people, came into first contact with them, right? They were the first the tribe that essentially came into contact with Christopher Columbus. And I think that is very important to note, because when we look at indentured servitude and slavery, the hub, especially for the Western world, is in the Dominican Republic, right? It starts there. That's the epicenter, and then it spreads everywhere else. So yeah, I think it's just very interesting because we see this like slow process of like whitening over the centuries, over the generations, and we see it in different ways, right? In Spanish, we call that term blanqueamiento, which is just the process of whitening. And when we look at it from different examples, for example, we look at Taina women, indigenous women in the Dominican Republic being forced to marry Spaniard men and only being allowed to marry Spaniard men. That's an example of blanqueamiento, where it's like over time, these kids are going to be whiter and whiter and whiter. They're not going to know their native tongue. They're not going to know very important rituals that are done during coming of age moments. And that's the point. That's what the colonizers want. And I think that's what we need to think about when we look at trans mental health around the world. It goes back to that. It's understanding that we can't talk about transness just from an American lens. We can't just talk about transness from a Western lens. Transness doesn't exist in those boxes, right? That's not what transness is. Transness is universal. And in order to really understand transness, you need to understand what happened in India. You need to understand what happened in the Dominican Republic. You need to understand what happened in Africa because all of it is what makes the story of transness and will better inform us as stewards of this work moving forward in the future, right? um Seeking for better community engagement around the world, more peace. We can't do that if we don't know the history, and we don't know the history, and that's why we keep repeating it. So that's why I think this is such a fruitful and amazing conversation that we're gonna have, because we're having that dialogue that's gonna push our people to the forefront.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Oh my gosh. There is so much that I'm recalling from what we spoke, like so intimate our connection has been. And I'm like rewinding to some extent about 20, 25 years ago. I was in I was in New Jersey. I did a short stint, as I told you. Like, I was like, I wish I could get transported just to see you, give you a hug, and come back. Yeah. Oh, yes, that's a nice comment. Jumper has made trans is international. Of course, it's universal. And Jumper, I think if we go and then, try to find other planets or other galaxies, I'm sure queer trans people are going to be there. And what you said is so vital that, like, where have indigenous people been? How long? We have been, I mean, indigenous people have been there all the time, you know? Like, just because it's just like, just last week I was meeting college friends, so like people whom I've known for 20, 30 years. Okay. Yeah, that reveals my age, but never mind. Right. So, and one person who also has been among, like, from the internally displaced, one of the multiple internally displaced communities within India. She's of Kashmiri origin. Again, unfortunately, we are not supposed to talk about that, but me being me, I will talk about it. Okay. And she was saying, like, how, and whether we like it or not, like, many of us sometimes get transported. In a way, the modern form of indentured labor until a few years ago in from India, South Asia, was outsourcing. And like, and if you are in IT and all, it looks very glamorous till you get there, and then you realize you are like extremely, I have to use the word because they was using this word cheap, as if we are objects. So we are literally cheap replacements for white people. Literally, it's as simple and as crude and as black and white as this. Okay. So we face obvious racism and, of course, to some extent, sexism, caste, everything, and extreme insecurity, because it's like you're stealing our jobs. And this is like, it happens, yeah. So, which is very strange, because, all these large companies, organizations, these profit making organizations, of course, they're making the profit off your labor, right? So, it's just that people did it on plantations maybe a few centuries ago. Now they're doing,
Hmm.
in glass and chrome buildings and on electronic devices. But eventually, it is the same thing.
Yeah.
And yeah. So, and you could never ever, all the damn laws which are supposed to be there will not protect you. You cannot.
Mm-hmm.
It is like in a very different way, a different kind of, we used to call it in a way actually, not digital slavery, we call it tech slavery. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah, I'm getting very furious and emotional about this because I have been
No.
in this position multiple times. I mean, this whole
Mm-hmm.
the joy of learning computers very early in life, because in the late 80s, early 90s, there was a big thing in India or maybe some parts of the world, and you go, oh wow, I'm going to this foreign country and all that stuff, and over there then you realize what your value is or no value, like, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah. And this whole privilege of speaking English, and which is a privilege in the country, which transports you there, suddenly so many things, like they just go in some spiral which you don't know. And because you are young and inexposed and suddenly thrown in this situation, you can't even fight back because you're worried, right? It's
Yep.
finally an alien country, and then
Yep.
you've gone there for a job, and so yeah. So anyway, so but coming back to, that's why they used to call, oh, the larger these IT companies, the bigger sweatshops they are, and we know about how workers' rights worldwide are getting so. I mean, to say that they're being violated is an understatement. Oh,
Yeah.
whole contract work, and no unionization or very minimal, and the so-called, oh my gosh, I mean, we just get fooled for so long, and sometimes you realize it too late. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
now back to yeah. mm, so many things again we can sort of come back to, but this whole thing of yeah, Reina Taina, I love the way you pronounce it, but
Thank you.
again, yeah, why is it, you know and more importantly, despite our familiarity, friendship, and shared experiences, anytime you feel uncomfortable about something, please, just you can take a
Yeah.
break, or don't want to talk about that. So yeah, and apologies ahead if I've asked something which is very sensitive. But
No, it's okay.
what in the Dominican Republic, and because we know that queerness has been there
Mm,
all the time. Again, yeah,
mm,
right.
mm-hmm.
Also saying, how in an anthropology conference, another queer friend and I said, and people were looking at us as if we were saying something out of the blue or out of the rainbow. We're like, oh, when have queer people been there? When have humans been there? It
Yeah,
is.
it's the
Yeah,
same thing.
yeah, right. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, but nevertheless, also, I think, we have to give it to maybe at least some of our ancestors,
Mm,
whichever way. Let us call them, if say our queer ancestors. I think, I'm not saying everything was hunky dory, but somehow they did not make a fuss. You are a queer person, maybe, we call two spirit, three spirit, or whatever language, whatever terminology, identities were used in the local thing. I think somehow this whole wokeness and so-called education thinking and all that, has it really, really helped
mm,
us, you know, in being accepted and accepting,
mm-hmm.
or seeing people as different but not, a-
Yeah.
and why and where is this phobia coming from, that you can't even use a washroom or a restroom in certain
Mm-hmm.
countries. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, US is the one, this thing, it's such a joke. And in India, like, on one side, we are so proud of the indigenous queer cultures to the extent that it's supposed to be normal, regular, whatever. And on the other side, and then we keep on saying that, oh, marriage equalities should not be possible. Marriage by itself may have a problematic thing, but be a problematic thing. So,
Mm.
what is it that, uh, uh, I know, unfortunately, we carry always the burden, we queer people, of sensitizing people and, fighting for our rights.
Mm-hmm.
But why is it like, repeatedly somewhere returning to square one?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's a great question. I think in my own personal experience and also like doing my independent research, I kind of think of it as like little kids in a sandbox, right? They're playing a game, and there's this one kid that they're just playing this game and they ended up taking up the whole sandbox. And then another kid wants to come and play, and they're like, no, you can't play. Like, this is my sandbox. This is only for me. And it's kind of like that when we think about like transes and why transphobia is as bad as it is. It's because when we think about having another kid in the game, then that means the game has to be a two-player game. So that means the rules have to change. The baby doesn't want that, right? The little kid doesn't want that. They don't want the rules to change. They want the rules to stay as they are because they're in control and they're having fun. If someone else comes in, then they may not have as much fun as they were having when they were just them. And now the rules have to change as well. So that's kind of how I see it with transness, where it's like, conversations of gender neutral bathrooms. Now it's a burden, right? Because now we have to change the rules and people have to get used to something else that they're not used to. And that's too much work. So that's why we don't do it. And that's really what it is. At the end of the day, like people like convenience. And when the convenience is in the mainstream, they're not going to change it because they don't want to. That means that they would have to change. And that means that also at the same time, there's a higher likelihood that they may not be in the dominant title or the dominant position that they want to be in. Because when we think about including transness, what I think properly including transits, what that looks like, it looks like grassroots community organizing. It looks like family. It looks like open door policy. It looks like not having these hierarchies. And they know that because we talk about it all the time. Indigenous people talk about it all the time, right? We all talk about it. And they don't want that because in their eyes, that's not fun to them, right? They want to have
Hmm.
all the money. They want to have the riches. They want to be the one at the top and have the title. Like that separates them from not only other humans but nature. And I think that's something that, again, going back to the transits, I think it's so important to talk about because yeah, it's nice to have a big yacht and everything, but not being connected to nature, that does harm you. Whether you see it or not, it does. And we see it a lot with a lot of rich people, depression, the SI, the suicidal rate among rich people and rich young kids, like is pretty high because money can't save anything. It can't save everything. It can only do so much. And I think that's something that it goes back to the conversation of transits and indigeneity. And that's why they go hand in hand in so many ways, because we really need to switch gears completely. And we all have to be willing to do that. And I think that's the biggest struggle too, because we're at like as a society are still trying to understand Black people. We're still trying to understand indigenous people. We're still trying to understand gay people. That's super real. In a lot of Western countries, they're still trying to make a sense of it. And there's a lot of pushback. So yeah, I think that's really what drives the transphobia is that unwillingness to change. They just want things to be the way that it is because it's easier, you know.
Um, yeah, thank you for that very, very important, a very uh, and a very what do you say, poignant way of describing, using children.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to take a small thing to introduce. Very delighted to have Hayati. I'm so excited. I'm not able to communicate the excitement. She is one of the co-founders of Yes, and she's a trans woman, a photographer. She does so many other things too, but very quietly. And one of the very important things, as I mentioned at the beginning of the life, is Nestam Sochias does this challenging task of reaching out to schools and maybe other higher educational institutions in smaller towns of Andhra Pradesh, a southern Indian state, where the very crucial but taboo topics of gender and sexuality are discussed, and it's not easy. And Hayati also is involved in so many other public events. Like we said earlier, yes, whether we like it or not, maybe anonymity acceptance is slightly more in the metros in India, but the more you take it in the to the so-called interiors, yeah, the more important it becomes. And sometimes, Hayati, just want to bring you in at this point. Sometimes, in India, as we said, and whatever India has been for so many centuries or millennia, we've had our local queer cultures, right? Trans and so many other, right? Which of course have socio-cultural traditions and so many things, right? But what has become of us? Why are we still struggling while self-acceptance and our own other intersecting identities and challenges also still so much pushback? No, oh, it's a Western thing, it's an urban thing. Oh, only you English speaking people, as if which is completely untrue. And yeah, so Haiti, how would you respond to it? Yeah.
Thank you for that, and thank you for today. I'm Mr. I mean Haritash, and I'm speaking with Rini, right?
Yeah, Reina. Yeah, Reina. Yeah.
Rini.
Okay.
Uh, so thank you for the question because, as you mentioned, in the places like metros, or especially in the place of metros, people come from different states. People come from the places where their parents or relatives don't live over there. So it's easy to live in the first place. It's easy to be who you are in the first place because there'll be friends who'll be accepting you who you are, and not something else. So when you're someone who's accepting you and understand you, you can be as who you are. But in the places like us, in the places like Vishakhapatnam and the places of tier two cities, minute you say leave out LGBT, the minute you say, most of the people don't even know the LGBT color, the rainbow color. For us it's a LGBT flag, but a lot of children and the people over here, it's a rainbow flag, rainbow color. That's it. It's a rainbow. That's nothing else apart from that. That's what I feel sometimes. Okay, at least in this way, it's reaching out to the children, and it's reaching out to the people. And to talk about the one of the important aspect of about communities from very long back in India. Uh, Community we see in the Hindu stories, uh, in Ramayana, in Mahabharata, even in the Muslim era, the the people who are castrated men used to be in the courts, as you also may know the story of those. So, but later and later, it became quite different. What I understand also is that because of the mythology and because of the awareness and awareness in the people who are educated, and unawareness of the people who are not so educated, because me and my one of my friends said this in a very beautiful way. I'm not trying to make this any class or caste based conclusions or talk. uh, Take it as uh, low class, middle class, high class. That's what my understanding is. So the people who are in the low class, I'm not degrading anyone, by the way, as this is also live. I'm clearly saying that this is only to talk and mention about us and not about dividing anyone. So low class is, most of the people may not be read well or literate. There may be a lot of people who are from income backgrounds. They cannot understand these things much. The only way people see the people from the trans women, especially at the railway stations or the buses, they only see this is what trans means. They don't know beyond that, they won't understand. We don't have places for someone to understand. When come to class, they'll have slight exposure to study. They have slight exposure to few other things. In these days, it's everything is available to everyone because of the smartphones all over. But the thing is that before 5 to 10 years, what is happening? As I'm talking about the middle class, they know about the children. That's who they are. That's what they are. They're not able to ready to accept those us. And in the high class, what happens is either they support the kids completely, or they send off the kids, ignore the kids. That's what happens. So what my friend purely said, with regards to these places, it's either fully acceptance or no acceptance. That's where it is. That's where the problem is. If one can inculcate these things in the school, in the colleges, in the parents' meetings, what happens is you need to understand your child first. You don't have to understand about society, what society says, what your child is, what your no, those are kids. Though they are only it's just a phase. It's just a phase. It will be done. No, it's not just a phase. It's their life. Either support your kids in your own way, according to what your understanding is, or else you can be ignorant, because don't hurt. Being ignorant is better than hurting them on daily basis, because mentally the kids' uh, life is gonna not. I mean, take my. I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt my own story, but coming my personal life itself, they didn't support me completely. They didn't left me completely. I was getting, I was treated uh, bad each and every day for more than 6 to 7 years, every day taunting in this or that way, which is like, I don't want to even, I can't go out from home. In which way? Because I never identify myself with the Jamaat system of the India, I mean, the community, the socio-cultural community from India. I never identified with them. I always identify myself as a woman, or I cannot go somewhere in the place where I am and live life in my own way. The only parents have to understand in some other way. It may take some time. They have to understand. If they can't understand, let the children live as who they are in their own way. Because from people from outside traumatizing us and teasing us every day, and also in the home is the same. The children are going to suffer a lot. It must not happen, and it need to change. Hope, and I get a bit more too, but hope I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you so much, Hayati. And we all have have to and will draw from our lived experiences only. There's, I think, sometimes no other way, and it's not been easy for us. And you're right. This is partial acceptance is another challenge altogether. We don't even know what and who we are. Sometimes we're still figuring out, and then they'll be like, oh, I've accepted only to this extent, or only over here. When some, I don't know, family members come or some friends come, don't expose it, don't say this, right? So yeah,
I have a bit.
sure.
I have to say something on that, uh,
Mm.
which is quite good when it comes to accepting. She accepting in a closet. Whoever you are, whatever you are what you are in my room, in a closed space.
Oh, okay.
You don't know me, I don't know you.
Mm.
Then I said, like I don't want any acceptance from you. Let me live my own way. I don't want that kind of acceptance, because I can't get that kind of acceptance on daily basis, and I need to be cannot with her and talk with her freely every time, which I don't like. So that's my.
Mm. Yeah. Thank you for that. So, Reina, now too, I have many questions in my mind now. Also, sometimes I think it's also good to have comparisons because for many reasons, considering how many of us Indian South Asians are all over the US and UK and more than any other English speaking country. And also, there are two, three things for which also we connect. We are considered the world's first and second most populous democracies. Although the way things are now, we don't even find anything democratic in these countries. Okay, now, but you know, uh, you are an artist, okay, and a musician, and yeah, but uh, we know that whether we like it or not, only some type of writing, some type of artwork, as in if it's visual art, graphic art, or music, you know, sells or goes viral. Okay. But still, many of us don't create or we do this because it gives us healing, joy, whatever, catharsis, and we express ourselves. But what has been the kind of response to your forms of expression? More, and I'm also asking this, I just want to link this to what's happening especially in parts of the southern US where all these book bans are coming, and in those book bans, especially in children's books and all that, it's pretty obvious that along with indigenous and black and all that, queer characters also, will not be this thing. And characters means they may be real life people also, right? For example, if a child is being told Marsha Johnson's story, okay, yeah, that book might be definitely banned immediately, right? Like, yeah. So I'm just giving an example, may not be even hypothetical, but yeah. So,
Mhm.
how do you respond to that? Plus, how is your art and music been, accepted, or what has been the reaction to that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. All my music is very much like social justice type of music, which I really love. I'm very open about that, and I think that's something that's really important to stand by is like your values. And I think it goes back to what we talked about earlier is like the whole thing about control, because something is like in a capitalist society, like we essentially have our like lives like planned out for us, especially if you are marginalized. Like it's already planned out because that's just how the laws work. Like I'm highly more likely if I get detention in primary school, which I did get detention a lot, I'm highly more likely to end up in jail. Like statistically, I'm more likely to end up in jail because I got detention when I was in the fourth grade. And that's the truth, you know? And looking at these book bans is definitely a response to people like me, trans people like me that exist in the UK and America, um, because they know that if their children end up seeing individuals living their true lives and being happy being themselves, they're gonna want to do that. And in a capitalist society, like it's very industrial, and they need to know the output. They know the input and they know the output. Like they want to know everything, and it has to be that way. And when you are a child who is allowed to be imaginative and creative, like you don't know where that child's going to end up. They could be a firefighter, they could be an astronaut, they could do something completely different, and they don't like that. And and I say that because it's not just gender and sexuality. It's everything. It's your personality. And that's why I like to think of people as like plants or flowers, where it's just like you never really know what the plant or flower is going to look like until it grows into what it needs to grow to. And it's just a matter of ensuring that it gets to that adulthood, that age where it can be its full self. So yeah, and then the responses with these book brands in the South, like that's something that we're really seeing is that the folks in the South, they essentially don't want their areas to look like New York. That's something that they always say, right? They don't want it to be so progressive. They want to keep their conservative values. And to each their own, like, yeah, I understand the values, but at the end of the day, like there are certain values which, and I always say this specifically with the United States, it's very difficult to say that you have like these American values or you have certain values and like 100% know that what your values are, they're good. Like it's very impossible to say that because every single American value is harmful. And that's the truth because it was built on the backs of indigenous individuals and African slaves. So nothing good comes out of that. That's just pain and misery. That's it. Um, and that's the fact. So I think that's something that they're starting to see. They're starting to see like, oh, it's not that, we had a civil rights movement and like, we got your Malcolm X and your Martin Luther King and da 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 da. No, like they're starting to understand that it's before that. It's deeper than that. And that's why they're scared. That's why so many people are passing all these anti-trans bills because they're starting to see that it's systemic and they're starting to see that they have to change the source, which means it changes the output. And they don't want that. And that's why there's such a radical response. I honestly think it's the right response because that means it's working, right? That means my music, people are listening to it, folks are listening to the trans women, trans individuals. And it's just a matter of hope and trust and hoping that these kids understand and they have the emotional capacity because I think a lot of younger kids have more exposure to knowledge. So I see them understanding things a lot more, especially things with like empathy and understanding. And I really do see a lot of young kids looking at the world from a different perspective. They're telling their parents, but what's so bad about being trans? I don't understand. Like they never hurt me. They didn't do anything to me. They're nice to me. Like what's the problem? And it's just like that's what I'm starting to see more of. And I want to continue to see more of that where it's just like, yes, we have all these different colors, amazing things about each other, but we're the same. We're human. And we are all the same in the sense that we all feel the same pain. We feel the same love. And I think that's something that a lot of younger generations, especially my generation, Gen Z, is focusing a lot on. You know, that empathy and that joy. So yeah.
Yeah, it is so beautifully said, especially towards the end. If children can see it, and whether they are questioning or exploring their gender or sexuality, we know this. And for all of us, I think it started much earlier than we think we did, because we lacked community or vocabulary or whatever awareness. It doesn't mean that we did not. We knew there was something different about us. Sort of in a way, like sticking to the, even if you are gregarious extroverts, just sticking to some people because we're going to accept us in a whole manner or whatever, or
Hmm.
not. So, and it's also interesting and important what Hayati said. And I think, I mean, I know, Raina, you are also tuned into what Hinduism and and it's never monocultural in India or many of our countries. It's never a single culture, which although all the fascists are trying their hard to, homogenize and all that. Okay. Yeah. And what they call also, no, homo nationalism and all that stuff, right? So, but having said that, so that is the tricky part, that is the sad part and the outrageous. Sometimes I also have these sarcastic laughs at these people. They want to present a dominant, hyper masculine type of any religion, although the pretense is or the farce is that, oh, we don't mix religion and whatever, church and state, or religion and politics or something. But it's often about that. And the so-called, not only freedom of expression, freedom to practice your own religion is also being this thing, unless you're so-called practicing one particular religion. But those damn religious, so-called religious texts, epics, whatever, mythology, whatever you call it, have so many queer characters, you know. And like recently we were talking about, I mean, like Buddhism, Buddha is queer, and Buddha never ever said, okay, they'll be like, oh, you don't know, you didn't live at that time. But that's the thing, no, that though those characters never defined or there was never any only one kind of definition, right? So these religious so-called practitioners don't want to look at that, because again, that way they are like, as if you're justifying or providing validation for what we queer people are seeking, right? Or intersection queer people. So for them, it's okay to practice so-called religion, whatever form it is, until you are sticking or finally promoting heteropatriarchy, right? Or yeah. And it's the same damn thing with the so-called nationalists, oh my gosh, like again, it's about Hindutva, Hindi, right? And the same thing, like this whole yeah. And it is so stupid because if you come to parts of southern India, most parts of southern India, even so-called metros, you will find multiple languages, but you will never find one language. And amidst all this, you want to this thing. So you want to homogenize, but only from your perspective. And how, I mean, we are a country of 1.4 billion people. How are you going to homogenize? Can you even homogenize one street, right? No, of people. So is it that, yeah, that's right, Raina, what you're saying. It takes away from so many cultures. And also, the whole language loss that we are this thing. And also that whole colonial thing about only if you have a script, you know, only, we are so much stuck in the, oh, is your language greater, older, more classical than mine, rather than what has that language given us, right? For example, okay, I'm saying this because yesterday or day before I read some more languages in India have got the classical status, okay, but so what, but you're continuing with the classical casteism, the sexism, the heteropatriarchy, right? That thing is not a problem. So I would first ask Raina to respond to this. I know there are so many things which I've said or connected with. It's also because how it is. So, and then I will ask Hayati to respond. So, this whole thing of, um, as I think, would you see it as you said, whatever it is, we are using our freedom of expression to the most. Okay, right? And hope happily, openly, happily. I'm not exactly saying always happy, but trying our best to express in our own way and stuff like that. Okay, and as you say, that is bothering you, but then what do you expect? Like supposing we ask, like this year in India, few months in June, we had our national general elections. In the US, it's scheduled in November next month. So the so-called, more progressive parties or whatever, Democrats or whoever, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're also just a shy away from the extreme conservatives, no?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
do you think that, for example, if Kamala Harris or somebody like that came, things are not going to change, right, drastically?
exactly. So I think that's something that's very important to note. And I think also even thinking about big picture, because I think that's the problem with like being in America is that we don't see this, but like for example, the formation of BRICS Plus, right? I think it's very strategic for America, regardless of if it's conservative or Democrats. At the end of the day, like we said, they're all just rich people, rich white people that just have different parties, but they're a part of the same table. And it's a strategic move to have a Indian woman to be president of the United States during a time when India is in cahoots with BRICS Plus. And they know that because BRICS Plus obviously is in the process of de-dollarization of the US dollar so that they can have their own reserve and not rely on so much on the US dollar. So like again, like exactly that. Like they're just trying to maintain their dominance in the world. That's all they're doing. And I think that's a bigger reason why now more than ever, there are so many moderates, independents, and Republicans that are going to be voting for Kamala Harris. And I think it's strategic. I think it's not even that, because Trump is horrible. But like, I don't even think it's just that. I think it's even bigger than that. It's a strategic move. And at the end of the day, Kamala Harris is not going to do anything for Palestinians. She's not going to do anything for trans people. She's not going to do anything for sex workers. She's not going to do anything for children. I'm sorry, that's the truth. She's not. What she's gonna do, she's gonna do exactly what Obama did and have their hands tied and then just like deport a bunch of people because that's what they're gonna do. They're gonna have to do that to get the likeness of the Republicans. So she's gonna do something in the border, make it stronger, deport a bunch of people, and yeah, that's really what's gonna happen. It's like at the end of the day, like I said, like you can't grow something good out of poison. It's poison. Like it's always gonna be poison. Like it's very difficult to grow something healthy out of poison. So that's really what it comes down to. And I think it's just a matter of not looking at it as a like we're all doomed thing, but again, going back to what I said earlier about family and community and grassroots organization and not that's the problem because we live such a hyper individualistic life here in America whereas like we don't even know our neighbors on a first name basis, like no one talks to each other. And like imagine how different it would be if people like in the same block, right, could commit $5 a week to just groceries for everybody, or like someone can say, hey, like I can get us rice and you can get us this, and just make things like that easier for each other. Because the biggest reason why there's so much division is because it's very difficult to live in America nowadays, especially like northern New Jersey where I'm at. A lot of people don't know this, but it's one of the most expensive places to live. We have one of the highest property taxes right next to Beverly Hills in California. And a lot of people don't know that because they think it's New York, but New Jersey, northern New Jersey, a lot of famous football players and musicians, they live in northern New Jersey. And they're the ones that have those $1 million houses that take up the entire block. That's only like 10 minutes away from me. So it's really just looking at that and also understanding this is something that I get very frustrated with because I feel like when it comes to change, you have to start with yourself. And it's very frustrating how hyper and like dependent we are on the government and on other larger entities. I think that's very harmful, because we're taking away our own power when we do that. And I feel like when it comes to the things that we need to live, it's very important that we find ways to find that ourselves and within our communities and not rely so much on these governments because they don't care about us. I believe that our neighbor has more of an ability to care about us than the government because the government has only one agenda, and it's to be in the dominant space. So, yeah, that's something that I say like everyone in America can have their politics, but I think we need to be focusing more on just politics in America. It needs to be localized community organizing. It needs to be that. It needs to be being in the community, asking each other, okay, yes, you're a Republican, I'm this and whatever, but like, what is it that you need? Okay, you need a job. Okay, so let's do a job fair in our community, right? Let's try to find people that are looking for to hire people. Or oh, your child needs to go to school. Okay, so let's go here. You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
just at the end of the day, people are upset because they don't have something, right? They lack something that they really want or that they desire. So why don't we talk about that? Let's be vulnerable. For me, for example, what do I need? I want to be in school for art, and that's what I'm gonna do next year. That's my goal. I want to be in school for art. I want to do art. I want the people around me to encourage me and motivate me and push me to where I need to go, not degrade me, not hinder me, not make it a competition between me and them. That's the
Yeah.
point. It's like everyone wants different things. It's not this scarcity thing. What I want is very different from what you want. We can absolutely help each other get to those positions without it being a competition for the top spot, because I that again, that's not the point. Getting to the top is not the point. It's finding what works for you, and doing that.
Yeah, very, very, lucidly said, like you always do, Raina. And Hayati, if you're here, oh, she dropped, I think.
Oh yeah.
But, if Hayati is able to rejoin, please do if you're listening. But, I would, what you said, it almost felt like you're talking about the realities in India. Okay. Uh,
Look at the comparison. Yes. You see, it's very similar.
yeah. So, thing is that, and probably you're aware, and nowadays many of us are hyper aware, okay, because it helps us, to be aware and beware, as they say, right? Yeah, I'm trying to see if Hayati can rejoin. But the most important and the tragic thing which is happening is, hey, Hayati, yeah, welcome back. Okay, so Hayati, I was just going to bring you on this a very crucial thing which is resonates with us in India, right? Suddenly, especially with the last few months, and maybe not even last few months, the last 2 months, 1.5, I don't know, the Supreme Court, and of course, all this cannot be done. Otherwise, again, they're making a mockery of the judiciary because it's supposed to be independent in the democracy. But of course, everything the government will interfere because that is what the government is all about now for the last 10 years in India. Okay. So, Hayati, I think a lot of what Raina said is almost reflecting what's happening in India, right? On one side, they are like, oh, we are going to let queer people with their partners open bank accounts, make them nominees and all that. then without absolutely an iota of information or invitation to our community to sensitize, bank staff. Okay, because they do not directly come under the thing of government staff, where we many of us are organizations individually, we've been doing so much multiple years of sensitization advocacy with government staff, but often it is never in banks and stuff like that, right? So that is a different ball game altogether. Now, and then on the other side, we have this National Medical Commission just making the Raina. If you've not heard about this, you'll have to know that just the along with the same time that this whole banks thing was a support, supposedly the central bank or the reserve bank also announced along with the court and everything that they're going to allow queer individuals. I don't know, there are multiple ways they have said it. There's no clarity on how the thing. Okay, and that's also the way they'll confuse the hell out of you. So how do you even use those policies and provisions? Okay. Okay. Now, the other thing is that the National Medical Commission, okay, I think should decommission them. They completely reversed and set back the undergrad medical curriculum, the training, the studies, uh, completely, if not erasing, but abnormalizing and sorry to use this word, but demonizing people with disabilities and queer folks. Okay, so yeah, is that what the non-profits, grassroots and individuals that do the best work for the betterment of our people. Yeah, true. Yeah. So so on one side, this has happened and this big shocker came, and the medical commission and actually the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare put out a notice that this somehow this whole thing happened, as if it happened without their knowledge of this whole medical curriculum being revamped regressively, that is suspended and all that stuff. But we don't know for sure finally what the undergrad medical students are going to learn with this new thing, which curriculum will be applicable. But the problem is it's an extremely, not just a regressive thing, it's a very scary thing, because if they're going to again and again pathologize us and people with disabilities, and
Mm.
also queer people with disabilities and all that. That's one thing. And then the other side, again, one more thing, which is like, they've put out this deadline free, not suggestion, what invitation for inputs from the LGBTQIA people. No, sorry, they will leave A and P whenever they want to, and sometimes just about, do some cursory inclusion. I know Hayati is smiling because
Hello.
both A's. Okay, and yeah, so they are like, give inputs, no deadline. What are they going to do with those inputs? We don't know. Okay, give inputs on your needs. I mean, as if it's like an all encompassing thing. Okay, and then they don't know, so we don't know they're given some two people's names. Okay, now we don't know what is those designation, what they're going to. And the worst part is, and for me the problematic part is, yes, community give your input, they're saying general public can also give. So all the queer phobes and then the transphobes can also give that, no? And all the misinformed people can also give inputs now. So, Hayati, I don't even know if this is worth responding to. I know it's been a long question, but I was also trying to highlight all the things, just like what Raina was saying. On one side, there seems to be something affirmative happening, and on the other side, it's like one hand and the other hand are not communicating or deliberately not in sync, right? So,
Got it. Yeah,
yeah.
I may not answer every thing what you mentioned, but a couple of things I can talk about is one is that is the finance ministry has said there are no restrictions on LGBTQ individuals opening a joint accounts or nominating their partners as beneficiaries. Uh, Even before this, in 2019, mostly 2019 or 20, if I remember, the insurance companies, especially when I used to work in ANZ Bank, I used to work for ANZ Bank as a senior service executive. So what I heard is from the insurance companies is no, so the people from the LGBT community can add their partners as partner for insurances as partners. There is no any other words, partners they can include in the insurances. And now, later, when it comes to the question you're mentioning about is opening a joint account with partners as nominating their partners as beneficiaries, in one way, it is helping. Uh, it is helping for the people who are working in MNCs in a places where everybody knows about this, how to use this. But what are the people who don't? Most of the people who don't use this. I mean, I'm just talking about socialist community, especially the Hijra community. How many people are working in the MNCs? How many people are working in the government sectors? Yes, I mean, previously Sujay was my manager in ANZ Bank. I'm glad he responded, and I mean, he came in. He was my manager in ANZ Bank, and we were working on different policy levels in ANZ Bank at that time. So coming back here, in one way, it works only for certain people, not everyone. If it has to be worked on, if it has to work, it has to work for everyone, just not for some people. And when it comes to uh, again, you were also talking about in the last you were mentioning. I mean, I forgot to recollect the last things you mentioned. Uh, just a second, give me a second.
Sure, take your time.
Mm-hmm.
It was just in my mind. I'm sorry, but it was too much for me to grasp for
Okay.
all the
It's
flow.
okay.
Uh, yeah, when it comes to yeah, so when you were mentioning about the policies and especially the LGBT people and general public to respond, this happened previously with the transgender law in 2019 and 20 with the corrections. Yeah,
Yeah.
so we, with the help of Humsafar Trust, with me and few other people, used to have regular meetings on this, and we used to uh, suggest multiple things, especially uh, with the applications in the transgender application website, which was quite well. But one thing which we didn't like is what they're trying to do is they don't want anyone of the people to come to office and change their identity cards or ID cards. They just want to do it everything online. So what my understanding of that is, as being a trans person, and I saw a lot of people from the people who are not very so educated in the transgender community, and a lot of people who don't know English in a general way. What happens here is people like me who comes and talks here, who goes to the things in metro stations and talk about these and MNCs, people who work in MNCs, they're visible to, they can understand everything. And the people who are in the government, uh, sorry, they'll understand a lot of things. But especially from the socialist community, if they cannot go to the government offices, if we can't go to the government office, how can they understand what is a transgender man, what is a transgender woman, how they can identify the health issues of both, and apart from that, how they gonna understand each and every policies, how the okay health issues are there, how it's gonna work for trans men and trans women. Being a transgender person is just not okay. Take a transgender person. Okay, health issue. These are the health issues. These are health issues. No, it doesn't work that way. For the trans woman, there are different health issues. For a transgender man, there are different health issues and procedures and everything. So one has to understand the differences first. Second, once they understand, as you mentioned previously regarding when you're talking about the bankings and sensitization in the banks, if government itself don't know the understand the proper meaning of the term transgender, when they include intersex people with intersex
Variations.
variations in the transgender umbrella, in the transgender definition, how come they're gonna understand the remaining things? No, they'll not understand the first thing. And secondly, when the people from the government don't understand, who give the identity cards, who don't know who people are, what people are, in India itself we have I mean many names, but especially the four things which are mainly noted are as Hijra, Shivashaktis, Jogti, Jogapas, and Kotis. Mostly these are the names referred in India, and we use them a lot. But there are also other names, and when the person said just a transgender person, why mostly the people think only transgender woman and just not transgender man? By ignoring the transgender men, they're ignoring a lot of issues with regards to transgender men health, transgender men policies, whatnot. There are a lot of things which need to be discussed, but when the government doesn't know the meaning itself, when the government don't understand who's gonna give the ID card, they don't know what to do. Banks get out of question. I'm sorry to say this.
No, right.
Sensitization doesn't mean that. That's the reason, especially NASM came into place. I'm not here to saying that NASM is doing this, NASM is doing something great. This is the very important reason we want to go to schools and colleges, talk about this in the schools. We are not going to talk about sexuality in the schools. We are going to talk about gender, which is very much important, gender identity, which is very much important, intersex variations, which are much important. Sexuality, I'm sorry to say that, people will understand and people will hide, and it's not so much visible when it comes to sexuality. When it comes to gender identity, it's very much visible, and it will be quite difficult. So what I myself and Shiva uh, wanted to do is, whatever we went through in our childhood, if we don't, until the age of 19, I don't know what is happening, what is gender, what is sex, what is sexuality. I don't know anything of these. If the children knows these things in the childhood, they'll they'll have understanding of their life and concentrate on much better things, such as studies, such as relations, such as everything else, rather than struggling with their gender identity. uh, that's what I feel, and that's the reason we go to schools and talk about these, which when the child knows who they are, what they are, whom they must not discriminate anyone, every person is equal. If this can be said in the school itself, you don't have to go to banks, you don't have to go to government offices, you don't have to go to a lot of places. School itself is the basic thing to accept a human as a human, irrespective of sexuality, gender identity. All are humans, and everybody need to understand each other and respect each other. Everything needs to start at schools. Schools are very much important, where we cannot go to banks, we cannot go to private institutions, we cannot go to public institutions. I can go, Shiva can go, my team of 15 can go. What about just not Vishakhapatnam? What about the village in Vishakhapatnam? What about the other cities? What about the other districts, states? It cannot be done in that way. It has to be done from the school itself, and everything gonna be changed, and everything will be gonna be fruitful in the later age. That's what I feel, and that's what I want to convey.
Great. Both of you have so lucidly, very beautifully brought out, actually what we think are the differences are the similarities in what's happening and not happening in our countries. Right. Yeah. A child's self-actualization is crucial for their development into adulthood. That's why there's so many adults who grow up to be, emotionally immature parents. Great. This is a good point for also both of you. It's over an hour. You don't mind continuing for a little longer? I hope it's okay with you both. I know, like Hayati, it's almost about 9:45 p.m. and for Raina, it is like I think it's almost noon time. But anyway, so because there's so much to say, yeah. But and Raina, I think it's so lovely that we are all like hardly really know each other, but there's so much we're able to connect and correlate because the damn discrimination, exclusion,
Mm,
violence is rather than different. There
yeah.
is, yeah, this special, I think they queer the discrimination. I mean, I'm laughing about it, but this is no laughing matter at all. Yeah.
Mm, mm-hmm.
So That is true. And like Hayati said, and I said just slightly earlier, and Raina, you've shared, and before we even learn all these terms, even with all the current day terms and translations and interpretations available, even before all that, as children, as humans, as people with emotions and everything,
Mm-hmm.
we know maybe we are beautiful in our own way. We are ourselves, but different. But as you said, this whole self actualization,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, is sort of literally snatched away from most of us,
Yeah.
right? And somewhere, and I have gone experienced this myself, it was like I wasn't even awaiting or, not that I was not bothered, I was not affected. I was so busy self shaming, you know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
self abnormalizing that I didn't even know what the outer world, meaning anyone outside of me, was doing, whether it was at home, school, somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Huh? And, unfortunately, many times uh, our biological parents or biological families, again, the ones within our immediate circle of influence or whatever, are the ones which sometimes, we feel very disappointed about, who are the ones who are kind of suppressing us to sometimes horrifying
Mm-hmm.
extent.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, I hope it's not traumatizing and triggering for you or anybody else,
Mm-mm.
but like they keep saying as if we have disappointed them, or like in we have somehow come out as a what is it, an unacceptable some reflection of them, and we don't even seem like their progeny. I know all this has been used and they keep on. Okay, but what about if we say that or feel that they have failed us almost, the ones who are
Mm-hmm.
supposedly safeguard or whatever, protect and love us as we are, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a great question. So I think like I was just like writing some notes, but I was thinking about just like again systemically seeing how capitalism has harmed altogether. I think when we look back at like indigenous communities, children were more of a priority in terms of like their growth and like, coming into their own. And as we see like the Industrial Revolution, and we see different types of industrial revolutions, coming up and like war and all these other things, children become less of a priority. And like there's so many studies that show this, but even in my own experience, I've seen like when we look at it from like a nation to nation perspective, when a nation doesn't prioritize children, it shows. It shows in the health, it shows in the civil unrest, it shows in unemployment, it shows in discrimination, it shows in so many ways. Because all of that comes out of a child that is not getting the things that they need during those crucial moments, during those crucial years of adolescence. And that bigger thing is that creativity. That's why it's like it's not only like bad that they're banning books, it's extremely harmful because that's going to hurt their growth. And they're gonna grow up not understanding black people, not understanding what actually happened in slavery, not understanding queer people. And that's a problem because you're only doing them a disservice, them and their brain and their hearts. And that's something that I think is even more evil, not allowing someone to be able to go on their own and see for themselves like what life is and how life they could live, like what life they could potentially live. And yeah, and I think that's what it is. And then thinking about, I think what it comes down to is like for folks now, parents or no parents, like being more aware of how the pressures of capitalism really like affect our relationships with our children or relationships with our parents. Because when you look at it, for me, for example, like it was always prioritizing the next paycheck over like my mental health needs or my emotional needs, and it was always like, oh, but you don't pay rent, this, that, and the third. And it's like that's very harmful to be doing that, especially showing that to a child who completely relies on you, and I think that's why when I put emotionally immature parents, it comes from a book that explains it. And it's essentially that it's a parent that at a young age they were not nurtured in the way that they were nurtured. So they literally do not have the capacity or knowledge to nurture a child properly because they were never nurtured. And now the pressure is on them, and that's why we get different types of bad parents and immature parents. Is because when you argue with an immature parent, it sounds like you're arguing with a 4-year-old because they just project everything back at you and they just say it's your fault the entire time, or they gaslight you. And that's a lot of the things where like a child throwing a tantrum exhibits. And that's something that I think is very important. That's why it goes back to when we talked about school and knowledge, because we need to have that awareness of like, okay, like if this happens, this could happen. And understanding that it is systemic and it does impact. At the end of the day, the darker you are in this world, the harder your life is. Fact. That's everywhere. Like that's just a fact. We can't run away from that. And not teaching children that, especially children of color, is going to completely harm them. That's going to set them back even more than what the statistic says. And I think that's something that we really need to focus on is like prioritizing the children again.
Yeah, yeah. So I think again, yeah, Hayati, I'll just bring you in. And this is exactly what has been happening in India in different ways. Like with queer people, we have like a little over 200 million Dalit people in India. I mean, there are no, so again, it's considered anywhere between 15 to 16%, whatever. Yeah. And and then the indigenous people who have still continued living their lives, that's supposed to be somewhere between 7 to 10%. So roughly about 25% are supposed to be among the most marginalized, the most distinct, like just ethnically, caste wise and all that. Okay. But how much, again, sometimes I return to what sometimes people, especially last few years, have been associated very closely with intersex people, and they have sort of brought back so many things to where it started and all that. Like they've said, sometimes we find it easier, like even Hayati said, no, sometimes the so-called ignorant, unaware people are seem to be more organic in their acceptance of children as they are, and who are whatever or whoever as an adult they turn out to be, queer or whatever, people with disability or whatever, rather than all the work so-called educated people, and or the other way around, as like also you both said in different ways. Sometimes it's the other extreme, they just see some English speaking queer people. I'm not talking about this whole the people who are labeling us as what western urban kind of people, but the ones who like say the bank officers or somebody, or the ones in these global companies, they are, every one of them will have an office in India somehow or the other. Okay. Yeah. And we know that this has been a story for like 20, 25 years, the whole capitalist corporate this thing. Okay. So they are going to see only us queer people who are speaking English and who can sort of vibe well with them, and to some extent, maybe some connection can be made. So for them, that whole, there is all this selective acceptance, right? Oh, you are okay for me, or I am not going to discriminate at all, if at all, as if they're doing some favor. Like, because you speak English, because you have also studied something, some course or some, finance or engineering or something and all that stuff. But for me, the hijda or the person, for whatever reason, who's on the street, or the queer Muslim person or somebody is unacceptable, because hardly there's anything common between us. So the damn commonalities also is what they're again using as a basis to discriminate or selectively accept or conditionally accept. Yeah. So, like Hayati was saying, now where do all the working class queer people go? Where do even any of the working class people go? And whether you like it or not, 1.4 billion people in India, easily 1 billion people or almost 1 billion people are very underprivileged, okay, in so many ways. Yeah, that is the thing. And also another point which Hayati said, and which I've also seen lately, with the last few years especially, the like this cursory consultations the government holds on the law. Oh, this law is going to become this thing be finalized. Oh, so you community people, whatever, trans community people, whoever, give feedback on this law, the policy. Okay, first of all, that will come with very short notice, huh? And then again you will have to give it in on the internet in a digital way in English. Now, how many trans people have the wherewithal for all this? Yeah. And so, yeah, Hayati, what you said is, that's the thing, that uh, I mean, always, they're very insidious in their pushback. Yeah,
I want to.
yeah,
I just want to add a
yeah,
point here.
yeah. I
I'm
want you
not
to
a.
add. Yeah.
I just don't want to say Hindi is language only. I don't want to be against the language Hindi here. But whenever you see the rules, you see only
Yeah.
English and Hindi. I don't. I can read Hindi. I can write Hindi. But I cannot understand Hindi much. Like I cannot read and understand, but I can listen and understand. I can't read and understand. Leave about that. Why they're okay? Most of the people understands English. I mean, English, yes. Hindi, no. Whatever the regional languages, why don't they do that? No, it's not happening, and it's as you mentioned previously that people who speak English, people who reads English, they somewhat understand. They somewhat talk with their friends who are in the colleges or studying in English medium, etc. What about the other people who doesn't read? What about the people who are from the older generations who can't know about these? What about them? They're completely ignorant towards them, and it must not work in that way. It has to work when you're helping someone, when you're working with on a specific topic, specific people. You have to do in and out. It's not, oh, I'm doing this. I'm ally for your LGBT community. No, it doesn't work that way. Understand it first, make it reachable to everyone, then how it works, then how it goes. And if not, it doesn't work just like, oh, you do this, I'll do this for you, that's it, done. No, it has to reach out to everyone. It I mean, just to add on a point, the government, I mean, I'm not much aware of the government things and etc., but I just wanted to point out this, that for every vote or a lot of policies and everything, they're giving in local languages and etc. Why not for transgender community? Why not these things for trans people? Why not the healthcare system for trans people? Why nothing is happening? It has to happen, and this is just for the sake of we are doing something for you. That's it, for the namesake. So it will not work in this way.
Correct. Yeah, again on the language thing, yeah, that's a very this thing what you said. There are Americans who don't speak Spanish, though it's maybe the most spoken language in the US. That's true. Yeah, and also, like we know, all these have so many dialects, right? And yeah, so now should Spanish, I mean, I'm not even arguing or anything. It's more like I'm trying to sort of just bring this thing because a very important point that you raised, Raina. Uh, though they want to project it, US is also very diverse, right? Extremely diverse amidst all the whitewashing they do, right? And the sorry again if I'm pronouncing it, the blank, sorry, what is that word?
Oh, blanqueamiento.
Blanqueamiento, right?
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
in a way whitewashing, supposedly whitening, and also blanking out everything else,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
everyone else, most
Mm-hmm.
important. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, like it's happening here, why we correlate is it's projected as if the whites are a majority, but that is
Mm-hmm.
not. Yeah. And
Right.
yeah, and they are the settler colonialists,
Mm.
right? Uh, the ones who have this current savior mentality that they choose whichever country has all the resources, like you said, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and they can go then bomb that country
Yep.
to complete erasure and
Mm-hmm.
then steal all the oil and every
Mm-hmm.
other oil and olives and different kinds of metals and minerals, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and unfortunately, we can't hold them accountable. Yeah,
Mm.
how dare you, kind of, right?
Yeah.
This takes me back to I think it was broadcast on BBC like almost a couple of decades ago when the heights of the Gulf War. It was not a Gulf War, no. It
Mm-hmm.
was America invaded and did not find the WMDs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but people said yes, some of these African, that the person was a human rights lawyer, okay, practicing. I'm not sure whether not Tanzania, one of the Sierra Leone, okay. So he was saying that yes, there have been various dictators and all that in many parts of different countries of Africa, whether it was Idi Amin or later, and some of the even democratic leaders like Robert Mugabe of Zimbabwe literally failed them and all that stuff. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
but they they were completely they were what do you call, completely bad mouthed, and actually they were extradited and sent for trials by the ICC and everything. But they said, will people even think about doing something like Bush Cheney, at that time?
Mm-hmm.
And same thing, no, they are up in arms about somebody, about the South Africans create this case against Netanyahu and everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And something very similar happens against the fascists in India. Okay. Uh,
Yeah.
I mean, actually speaking, what is currently seeming today as a very smooth and a very interesting, important conversation, tomorrow some words will be pulled out of context and they can abuse or harass us. Yeah, you know what I'm saying. But still,
Mm-hmm.
can't keep say quiet because of that. So, Raina,
Mm-hmm.
okay. Uh, so the thing is that I have been with America. Do you think white America ever be, if will anyone even dare to hold them accountable for the endless nonsense that they do all
Mm-hmm.
the time?
Yeah, I think about this one individual. She's a celebrity, famous black woman. She is in SNL, the show SNL, I believe.
Mm,
And when they asked her a similar question about like how do we, make this change? And she, and I quote, literally said, mess their money up. And what she was basically saying is that again, we need to understand that like my melanin was currency at some point. Like that was the truth. Everything is built on capital, on currency. So it's like the same thing that so many of us did a couple months ago and some folks are still doing is like boycotting certain fast foods, certain big corporations. And it's like it's literally hurting their money. Like it's just stop being a consumer to them and stop like consumerism to them is essentially saying that it's okay what they're doing, and that's something that is it's difficult, but something that we need to figure out in the US. And I think that's something that's very difficult, is because every single time I bring this up in the US, um, you can immediately tell they're American because they get very defensive and they're like, so you just don't want, okay, so you don't want no Uber rides? Okay, so then let's get rid of Uber then. And they get very defensive and they're like, okay, so then take my car. So I'm just gonna walk now, right? And they get so mad and upset. And it's just like, what is the problem with you understanding that this is harmful? What is the problem with you understanding that since 1996, the Congo has lost 18 million lives because of Apple, because of institutions and corporations like Apple. And that's the fact. And it's just like what does America have to say for themselves? What does white America have to say for themselves? I think that's what it comes down to. And whether they want to ignore it or not, it's becoming more and more apparent every day. And I already know that I think we need to go into more of a less nationalistic thing and more of like a global unity type of mentality when it comes to politics. I think we can't continue doing this like separate politics thing because it's just not, it doesn't work. Whether we like it or not, we all need each other and we need each other to support each other and to grow and to do all these things. And it's not gonna work. This extrapolating from Africa, from other places, like it's not gonna work. It needs to stop because this is not the way it should be. And that's something that that is gonna be, unfortunately, is gonna be a rude awakening for white Americans, whether they want to believe it or not. It's gonna be coming in force in many different ways, and it's like sometimes it has to be that way. Looking at Kenya and how how the youth have taken over. It's like really understanding that harm is harm, regardless. You can't. This justification of harm needs to stop completely. Like, oh, like I can do this because I'm this identity. Oh, but I'm this identity and I'm justified because they did this to my people. It's like, no, like, no. That's just gonna feed the fire and it's just gonna make things worse. I think what we need to come down to, especially white Americans, is that white Americans need to understand their positionality, not only in America, but in the world. White Americans have the most privilege than anybody on the planet. Fact. And what they need to understand, that with that privilege comes a lot of responsibility. And that means you need to keep your mouth shut and your two ears open. That is your responsibility. That is your job. Your job is not to open your mouth. Your job is not to write policy. Your job is to listen and execute. That's it. That's what you need to be doing. And like that's something that white Americans need to understand, is that it's not about you and it's not about ego. And it's us saying this doesn't make you less, doesn't make you this whole thing. Like you just need to hold yourself accountable because you don't live here by yourself. You don't. Whether they want to believe it or not. Like we're here. And it needs to be done this way because there's just gonna be more civil unrest everywhere in so many different countries. And again, like let's look at it like even me talking to like everybody around the world. It's like, is it really worth it for like a couple of white Americans for the entire planet to be complete shit? Like that's another thing that we need to really understand. Like that does not make any sense and it's not worth it. It's not. And again, I'm sorry, but America's a failing state. Like, why is 25% of the individuals that are incarcerated around the world exist in America? 25% of the incarcerated people on the planet exist in the United States of America. You're not gonna tell me that it's because there's bad people. Like, no, you created a system that made it so easy for people to get arrested. You instill these fear, all these things, and then like blame them because they're not doing X, Y, and Z. Like you're making it impossible, right? It's like, for example, like I always say, because I used to run track, it's like having shackles on your ankles and then being told to still run while everyone else, they don't have shackles, and then being punished for not being first place, but you have shackles, but you're being punished for not being first place because you're expected to be in first place. It doesn't matter if you have shackles or not. And it's just like, and they don't want to see it because they know they're wrong. And that's why they act like they act in America. That's why they're banning books. That's why they're doing all these things because, like I said earlier, with the emotionally immature parents, they deflect. They make it our problem. Like I know something that my parents used to tell me is that like it's my fault and my problem that I became bisexual or that I chose these things and I chose this oppression because I wanted it. And it's just like that just tells me someone who does not understand critical race theory, who does not understand the colonial theory. And it's the truth. Because you're saying just like the white man, just like law enforcement, that everything is my fault because of just how it is. Because I decided to choose this lifestyle. So it's my fault. No. Because if you look at it from a transformative justice lens, you look at the root cause. And the root cause is not me. The root cause is America. Fact. Whether we want to say yes or no, it's the truth. Our ancestors lived through it. It's the truth. And I think that's why it's also extremely hypocritical that we're considered a melting pot, but yet it's almost as if you must become whitened to be here. And it's the truth. So many immigrants, they lose their language. They don't teach their language to their kids, how to cook, nothing.
Yeah, wow, that is such a profound and a very meaningful and a very realistic thing you've said. I mean, so much you've said, each of that throughout this conversation. And Raina, yeah, that's the thing, like not only are like they suppressed and still continuing to relentlessly erase historical and what was indigenous cultures, and of course resources across the world wherever they find the vulnerability. Okay, and most of it is in places like Haiti, Dominican Republic, and maybe the other islands, and of course many different parts of South America or Latin America, Central America, and of course Africa. uh, India is busy destroying itself from within, so we don't even, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And if the US is not doing it, all the so-called damn NATO allies are doing it. Okay,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that is one thing. Now, plus they still, and this is the blessed thing, for example, take the Taliban. Yes, the Taliban have been brutal, they've been so bloody patriarchal and everything. Okay, but for whatever reason, how many Afghan origin or Arab origin people, if they go and settle for generations in the US, are they really getting their basic rights? The same thing, this whole time savior complex. Oh, I came and saved your country, I came and restored democracy, which is a nonsense. And not what is going to happen in project 2025 or whatever else. Okay, and see, I accommodated you because you came as a refugee, asylum seeker, immigrant, whatever. So you are supposed to be doubly not just grateful, but completely shut your mouth, even though
Mm-hmm.
you're finding the continued internalized racism, Islamophobia, and transphobia, everything. Okay, plus automatically, just because of who you are or looking a certain type, because of skin color or growing a beard, except of course you're a Jew. Yeah, there was a time, of course, when Jews were also prosecuted unnecessarily just for being Jews. So some of automatically are suspicious, or what do you call, criminals until proved innocent, guilty until proved innocent. And only like a fraction, small micro fraction of those names came out, whether it was Tyler Nichols or so many other people, right? Like in the last few years, there have been this thing like the Black Lives Matter, say her name, and all those movements. But we know that there is so much that is so systemic. Okay, now of the 20, the 25% of the prisoners were all in the US. Most of them we can almost, without even seeing or counting or even visiting one so-called what they call correctional center, what the hell are they correcting them about and correcting them for, and all that is a different thing. I hate this word correctional center. Okay, and we can be sure what is their skin color, and if not skin color, what is the faith that they are practicing. Okay, it has to be Arab American, and they will not even be, they'll be Arab Americans, citizens of the US in some ways. Okay, they would be otherwise, Native American born blacks, but
Mhm.
because of who they are. And we know very well so many trans people are still, especially if they're black trans women or drag queens or something, black Latinas and all that,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Complete. And then they'll say suspicious circumstances, mysterious circumstances, and all. This is just endless, okay? So, but you don't want to look within, yeah?
Mhm.
And the damn version of the religion that you've exported, right? The white this thing of Christianity which went. Sorry, people might call, but I'm agnostic, so I have the right and the entitlement to criticize any religion. The current the organized religion, which is disorganizing everything. Okay,
Mhm.
yeah. So it is those white people only, no, who went about proselytizing and completely erasing local traditions, local wisdoms, and whatever faiths, practices, communes, and everything, right? And
Mhm.
all of the half-white things in Australia, right? Going on, and the thing is that, na, they never actually forced interracial marriages, because then that would have to be formal and those people would have to be given rights and all that. It's like
Mhm.
go about mass, what do you say, impregnating
Mhm.
with white, but
Mhm.
so and these children are blocked, and this has happened in Canada too. Okay,
Yeah.
that them in those institutions, because they have to be whitened as much as possible, not just in skin color, but so this whole thing, this endless project, okay, has resulted in this mess. But they do not want to not only accept, they want to crush every person,
Mhm.
every voice,
Mhm.
uh, you know uh, um, highlighting this, okay. And yeah, and I think so much that you also resonate with, right, Raina?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And like, as if this is not, even if it is almost criminal that white people are not learning about black history and everything, okay.
Mhm.
Even black people are not being allowed to learn,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? Yeah,
And that's the issue.
yeah, yeah. And I also have the saying that, like for instance, I read, like, we know Stonewall, right? I mean, historically, what happened in 1969, yeah, the Stonewall, the thing. I
Mhm.
to a website on Stonewall history or Stonewall thing. They say very clearly, the Stonewall uprising was that, it was an uprising, it was a rebellion, it was
Mhm.
revolution. The police interfered and made it a riot. So beautifully, so honestly, and so powerfully said. Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
not only mess it up, you will go on misrepresenting.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
for many of us who are in India, we don't know too much about it. But the same thing happens in India, that whatever rights have been won by the queer people, okay, the
Mhm.
pushback which happens is that if some issue has happened, some problem has happened somewhere, okay, among the people, who are available for them to generally jail or lynch or kill or whatever, Muslims, Dalits, trans people. It
Mhm.
happened just last week in Hyderabad, the a city which is, or at one time, pre-independence, that area was known as the Nizam's dominions, one of the wealthiest thing. It has got,
Mhm.
like, even documented about, I think, 1,000 years of indigenous queer culture.
Mm.
But over there, visible trans people are always vulnerable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's such a shame. It is, it is outrageous, but that's the thing. And we know this is happening it almost day in and day out. So you're busy criticizing the anti-trans laws which are happening in Uganda or Russia or something. But what about you? What about the US? Right?
The US? No, yeah. I mean, I was talking about the anti-trans bills in the US specifically.
Yeah,
Those are the ones that I was referring to. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I'm not really following them, honestly. I'm more like
yeah.
ignoring them. But um because again, like it's just all rooted in the same systemic things that we talk about, you know. I even searched up the percentage of prisoners that are non-white in the US, it's 62%. So 62% are Black, Hispanic, Native American individuals, and of that 62%, 37.5% are Black Americans, while Black Americans only make up 13% of the US population. So look at that number, you know.
Mm,
So
mm,
more
mm.
a large majority of Black people that live in America are living in a prison, you know, and that's just, you know, another statistic, another fact that just like adds to this layer, because it's very multi-layered, you know, multinational, multi-layered. And like I said before, with like immigrants coming into this country, and you see them becoming whiter and whiter, because at the end of the day, like the whiter you are, the better your life is. Like I said before, it's like that's something that is indirectly understood, subconsciously understood all throughout the world. You know, whether we say it directly or not. And I think that's something that we need to be more conscious about and be intentional about pushing back against, because that's something that if we continue on that way, it's just going to perpetuate the same harm that we've been experiencing, you know? And I think that's the key takeaway there.
Yes, I think it's been a long conversation, and I think this is something which we can close on. Unless, Raina,
Hmm.
you want to add something, drink your water, please. Yeah, and yeah, but gosh, we have spoken so much,
Yeah, it's
in such,
awesome. It's an
yeah,
honor
such
being here.
yeah, it's in such an organic way, and then Hayati pleasantly surprised us. I think, you know what, I went about reminding people. Okay, like this is going to be a very unique and a very rare conversation.
Hmm.
Yeah. Just the last, very very last thing. Sorry, I didn't ask about this earlier. It's also because I don't. I'm not very aware how to pronounce it. You say Jotex, Jotex, you say Afro, J-O-T,
Oh yeah,
yeah,
Afro Hotex.
Jotex. Oh, sorry. Okay, the
Yeah,
J is on.
yeah.
Like, like,
Hmm. Yeah.
like Jose, like that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
so, can you just slightly, demystify it? What?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I,
of
I
course.
can guess, but it would like to hear from you.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I can give a cute little synopsis. So basically, Afro-Joteria studies is a academic study that I developed that comes out of the academic study Joteria studies, and that was developed in 2011 by queer and trans Latinx individuals. And they wanted to essentially create an academic study that focuses and examines specifically the lives of queer and trans Latinx people, not just Latinx people at large, because something that they saw in their Latinx studies, Indigenous studies, and Africana studies is that they weren't really talking about queer and trans people, which doesn't make sense because that's a really big piece of the our cultures in many different ways. So they created Joteria. I spent 3 years investigating that research as an independent researcher, and then I wanted to make it even more specific and talk about the lived experiences of queer and trans Afro Latinx, Afro Indigenous, and Afro Caribbean individuals. And that's what I focus and like investigate even further. So something that I do in my podcast that I have, I want to be able to invite, you know, different types of Afro Latinx people from like Dominican Republic, Brazil, Mexico, all different parts, Trinidad, and just have these conversations of like, as artists, as musicians, how does our art, our presence in the world impact Afrojoteria studies and impacts how we can better inform our social justice work. So that's a big part of Afrojoteria studies. Is a call to action at the end of the day. It's learning about a specific group from their perspective and using this information to better inform how you navigate your life.
Wow, thank you. Really feel enlightened. I know there's so much more. I should go back and hear your podcast. Is it in English or is it English, Spanish, or that kind of mix?
Yeah, it's mostly in English. There's some parts in Spanish, but it's mostly in English, yeah. And you can find it anywhere on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, yeah, basically anywhere. It's I can send it in the chat. It's called the Vamos a Hablar Inglés podcast.
Mm.
Vamos a hablar inglés.
Chat and also please WhatsApp me. Yeah, that would
Yeah,
be okay.
of course.
Yeah. So, wow, like there's such a rich body of work that you are not constantly doing and putting out, but for you, no, it's not just work. It's you, it's a part of you, all right.
Mm-hmm. It's a passion, yeah.
Yeah, so vamos, yeah. Yeah, Phoenix. Wow, today we suddenly all our co-hosts have yeah. But anyway, nice to see you, Phoenix, who's a young queer person from Hyderabad, which we just mentioned. They are also
Mm-hmm.
one of our long-standing partners. They and one of their counterparts in another state in India, Maharashtra. They
Mm-hmm.
have young queer collective, okay, with whom we also do lives. And yeah, so Phoenix is asking, is it on Spotify? Is your podcast is also accessible to Spotify?
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah. You can find that on Spotify as well, yeah.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then also for better support, if you go to my website, www.larenataina.com, you'll find my podcast page there, and it lists all the different links that it'll be on. So that if that's easier. Because I have it's like I think there's like 14 different places that you could listen to
Wow.
it. So I wanted to be accessible because I know we all listen to different things around the world.
Oh yes, there's so much. Yeah, sure, Phoenix. I think we should have another session. There's so many things that we can talk about, Raina.
Yeah.
Oh,
And next time we should bring my brother
yeah,
AJ.
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Another one with him. He's already connected and we waved and all that. So I did not bring him into this him them. Sorry, I think they use he they pronouns,
Mm-hmm.
but because we have lots to talk about. So yeah, surely, and that will be a very interesting because in a way it's closer home because of their
Mm-hmm.
hey,
Because they're Indo-Guyanese.
yeah. Hi, Ajay again. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's like an Indian in you partly, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm you're all that's why the universe connected all of us. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So well, it was Minos Nachos for me, but gracias to you, very fantastic, so enriching, energizing, yeah, very enlightening thing, very poignant, very touching. Yeah, as despite being a speaker and writer, sometimes I all words keep failing me. Sometimes like just cannot uh, express enough, not my just gratitude, but my honor and joy. Okay, amidst all this, as we are signing off each time, we say, let's spread the queer joy. Yeah,
Yes. Let's spread the queer joy. It was a pleasure.
yeah. Okay, yeah, Phoenix. Phoenix is saying mucho gracias. Yeah, so yeah. So yeah, and also as we say in India, sometimes salam is peace in multiple languages, and we say satrangi salam, the seven colored or the rainbow. Basically, it's rainbow salutes.
Mm,
Okay,
nice.
thank you. Okay,
Thank you.
bye everybody. Practicing. continue to join our future lives. We will, return with more next week and after and after. Yeah, and sometimes we will, rehost or re-invite people. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. Bye bye. Yeah, I will, share this and add you as a collaborator. Okay.